balance among logistics and supply chain providers is the topic of my conversation today with Paul Asel. He's managing director of NGP Capital. Hello, Paul. How are you?
Doing great, thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. So just how are logistics companies faring today in these very difficult times?
Well, this has been a chaotic year, as you know, and so many of our firms started with one plan at the beginning of the year. They revised their plan in March when COVID hit, and many of them are revisiting that plan again. So we've seen a lot of volatility. I would say there was a significant drop in January in China. We saw that reverberate to the United States in March. Q2 was down, but we're seeing a very significant resurgence now.
And where specifically, who's feeling the most pain in terms of mode of transportation or transportation technology, or is it just across the board within the world of logistics?
I would say that there's been a significant change in perhaps how we think about the concept of efficiency and cost focus. And so, really, for the last 20 years, the focus has been on reducing costs. Now, I think there's an expanded definition of cost, which is that it includes resiliency and flexibility. Thomas Kuhn in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions has said that the importance of a crisis is the signal that it applies that change is necessary. And so I think this has been catalytic for a lot of industries and groups in the supply chain rethinking their supply chains to make sure that it's flexible for these kind of catalysts.
I would think the interesting challenge for someone like yourself interested in this sector would be the wide variance in terms of tradition versus innovation. You have the on the ground truckers, planes, and things like that are like couldn't be more traditional and legacy. And then you have very high level innovative logistics technology. So where's the appeal of the logistics business to you as an investor?
It's a good question. We are seeing what we're seeing in the logistics space is consistent with what we are seeing across a variety of different industries. We are investing in the connected world. We are moving to a data-first world in which everyone and everything transmits a signal. And we believe that that is going to enable and transform industries. McKinsey has said that the internet transform 15% of GDP, that the Internet of Things will transform the other 85%. So we believe that while logistics is all about moving things, that one of the most important flows is the data flow.
So you're saying, I hear you saying that it's the technology side of logistics that maybe is the most interesting and exciting to you. Would that be fair to say? Is that where the innovation is?
We are technology investors, and we are looking to apply technologies in a way that is transformative to businesses. And so we think of technology as enabling change and also disrupting change. And so there are two types of investments that we or any other venture firm could make. And one is to use technology and data to enable companies to work more effectively, or to move in and transform or disrupt an industry. And we're seeing both of those type of investments as venture moves into logistics.
How do you think that the logistics industry in general has been viewed by the investor community and the venture capital community up to now? Do you think it's gotten proper attention, or has it been overlooked by investors who may be more interested in the dazzling offerings of Silicon Valley or something like that?
We started looking at the logistics industry back in 2013. At that time, I would have said that it was an overlooked space. We had some private equity players that had come into the space and there were some consolidating moves that were made. Since then, we've seen tremendous interest from venture capital. 34 billion in venture funding has gone into the logistics industry between 2014 and 19. So it actually is one of the top sectors in terms of vertical markets that are receiving capital from the venture industry.
Is the focus on startups or early stage companies, or are you also looking to get interested in more mature companies that are moving forward with types of innovations?
We are funding companies that are early stage and growth stage businesses, typically companies that are less than 5 years old. But those companies are very much serving the logistics industry, and so very much thinking of traditional players as customers for their products.
Mm-hmm. But I would think that among the sectors that would be most affected by the pandemic and the economic downturn would be logistics companies, because as retail sales plummet, so therefore do the means of delivering the product to store shelves, to the extent we have store shelves anymore. So what is the general state of the industry right now? I mean, I imagine it depends, but could you like generalize as to how this business is doing and what its prospects are in the near term?
We're seeing a quite dramatic shift in where the flow of goods is going. So, if we look at the food industry, for example, we've seen two different types of shifts in the last 6 months. The first has been away from restaurants and companies to consumers. And that has been a very dramatic shift in how things are transported. And then within the consumer space, we've seen a move from offline to online to e-commerce. So we have two of those dramatic shifts happening at the same time. And so there has been a fair amount of disruption and dislocation as logistics firms and brands have tried to navigate both of those at once.
Mm-hmm. So there is actually interest in the investor community despite the current downturn. I imagine you guys are always looking beyond the immediate moment in terms of your investment strategies, but you sound like you're pretty bullish on the long-term prospects of this industry, right?
We are, and we see the opportunity to use data to increase the flexibility of supply chain networks, to increase resiliency and improve transparency. So, if we think about a lot of warehouse space has been dedicated warehouse space in the past, and that makes sense in an environment that is static. But if you have a very dynamic supply chain, then having a much more flexible supply chain, dynamic use and allocation of warehouse resources is going to make much more sense. So that's just one narrow slice of the industry. The holy grail is that we can provide an integrated data network that provides transparency from beginning to end and allows that flexibility to be able to operate in real time.
So you believe this industry up to now traditionally has been essentially fragmented and you're looking to integrate. That's a pretty tall order. I mean, what does that require? Is that a technology play? Is that a merger and acquisition play? I mean, what is required to move this industry from a state of fragmentation to integration?
It's a great question, and we think of flows first of all in three forms. There's the flow of goods, the flow of paper, and the flow of data.
Mm-hmm.
And the second point on that is trying to get data integration from the beginning is a boiling of the blue ocean. That's not what we're trying to do. Rather, we're thinking about data insertion points, different points in the network where it solves a pain initially and can be a solution that's manageable. and then that becomes a beachhead for then looking to integrate other parts of the supply chain. So one area, for example, is warehouses. A second area could be in purchasing, but we see a number of different insertion points where we're seeing innovation happening, solves a real-time pain point today, and then ultimately can be used to integrate more data over time.
Mhm. What do the terms smart logistics or smart mobility mean to you?
That means that we are moving to data first companies. So,
Mhm.
if we look at those three flows that I talked about, ideally, we should be able over time to eliminate paper. Data, the digital form takes supervenes that. And ultimately, I believe that data is going to be a bigger differentiator as a flow of than the flow of goods. The flow of data should inform and predicate how goods flow.
How interesting that one of the most traditional industries out there can also has the potential at least to be one of the most innovative. And Paul Asel, I'm so glad you could join me today with Mount Everest in the background at a virtual conversation at 29,000 feet. Uh, but thanks very much for your insights into the state of this industry and the prospects for it in the long term as well. Thanks very much for being with me today.
It's a pleasure talking with you. Thank you very much.